Dave, brother, welcome to the banks of the Huron River. It's good to meet you and have this conversation with you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and uh, welcome from here in Central Maine.
It's funny because actually I was over in North Carolina recently. We were talking about stopping up in Maine. We just didn't make it that way, but I've heard it's really beautiful up there.
Maine is lovely. Yeah, very sparsely populated state, a lot of wild places, and a lot of good hunting and good fishing, and
That's
wild
awesome.
mushrooms and foraging.
Yeah, when I was down in North Carolina, we spent some time over in the Smoky Mountains, and that was a beautiful, fun experience.
Yeah, Smoky Mountains are beautiful. I've got two daughters who are living down in South Carolina, and I've been down there some and experienced the mountain some. And wife and I have really enjoyed driving home from there, taking uh, a very long, circuitous route, staying off all high-speed highways and sleeping in the car on the way back. So it's beautiful.
Those are some of the funnest experiences I've learned in my time down there. Though you got to be patient with the elk that like to take over the road and just lay down and take a nap. Like they just get tired, and this is where I'm staying.
Wonderful.
But yeah, I mean, it was really cool out there. And I want to talk to you a lot about life experiences. So let's talk a little bit about where the journey that you find yourself on now, where that began.
Okay. Which journey are you speaking about specifically?
Just, just the journey of life overall. What is it that where life kind of brought you to today? How that started?
Well, I've always been one who loves God's creation and spent time in the outdoors, and uh, I was fortunate enough to find and marry a woman who was like that as well, and we live a very simple homesteading kind of lifestyle here in Central Maine, involved in Christian ministry as well as uh, growing our own crops and hunting and fishing. And uh, my I think I mentioned to you when I reached out to you uh, back a little while ago that we had a very difficult time for a good many years with very serious chronic illness. The family was very ill with Lyme disease as a result of our rugged outdoor lifestyle. So that's been uh, a struggle. But we've learned a lot through that, and I've written a book about that. But I guess through all the twists and turns of life, the hand of the Lord has brought us to a place where we live close to the earth. Uh, Absolutely love it.
It's those experiences in life, and you talked about your love for the outdoors. Was that kind of like where you started to build that connection, started to build that understanding that there's something greater than who we are in relativity to spirituality?
Well, yeah, certainly it contributes for sure. Uh, I I guess I never feel closer to God than when I'm in the outdoors. Uh, we see I see His handiwork in everything. Uh, so uh, I would say I would say for sure that has contributed.
I know for
What
me, I was going to say, I know for me personally, the reason that I asked that question is that was kind of where I guess my eyes started to open, or those thoughts started to register and resonate with me. Because for a long time in life, I was one of those people that, it was simply you put your head down to the grindstone and you just go. You don't think a
hmm
whole lot about the environment or that you're in. You don't question them. And I've always had, my outdoor activities, but then I hit a moment in life where things changed. I call it facing up to one of life's great storms, and it almost like washes that mentality away from you. You start to question and look at deeper aspects of life as a way of you could equivalate to utilizing and looking for the resources around you in order to build a better quality of life or a better path for yourself and start to gain control over the narrative.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say uh, the ultimate objective in this path of life that we find ourselves on is to get to know the God who created all of this, and uh, so I guess that's where the journey would find the most poignancy for me would be not only enjoying the world that He's created, but getting to know Him through that revelation, through the work of His hands. Um, wife and I have both said that there's no better prayer time, no better time of meditation than sitting on a tree stand for 10, 12 hours. So um, anyway.
That was actually where a lot of this happened to come into perspective for, because I was introduced to meditation through a conversation where it was like, that's completely irrelevant to me. It has nothing to do with my life. And then, getting out in the deer stand, taking time for archery practice, you
Hmm.
realize just how much of those things that people talk about or you read in a book that feel intangible are actually a part of your daily practices or a part of the practices of things that you enjoy. And when you look at it from that perspective, you see the fun and the adventure that comes out of the exercise, but then you're also opened up to this perspective of the work that's going on internally to reach out, cast your voice, utilize these prayers or these different practices of mindfulness, meditation, and spirituality. And they help you to get to know yourself a lot better on a lot deeper level.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Um, I also would argue that we can um, get to know God and get to know ourselves on a deeper level spiritually as well by studying God's word and that sort of thing. But the two go hand in hand, I would argue.
And that's where building a good reading practice really comes in. You know,
Yeah.
whether whether you start out something simple that you can relate to, like maybe a biography or whatever genre you're into as far as reading goes, and you start getting that practice going, it starts to open up those doors to where you can start picking up, a spiritually based book or a Bible or this or that and relate because you're able to put yourself into the story.
Okay. Yeah. 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 So yeah, good. Very good. So you do a lot of hunting and fishing out where you are. Is that true?
I
You
do a
mentioned
lot of
archery.
hunting. Yeah, I exclusively hunt with archery equipment. But yeah,
Oh,
I hunt
okay.
and fish. I hunt and fish a lot, and I spend a lot of time hiking on trails, taking people out, teaching them about these sort of things as far as like the aspect of building mindful practices and meditation practices within the safe space of the outdoors. And that's something that, it doesn't just have to apply to a self growth journey or a self healing journey. It can also apply to the idea of taking a journey to get to know and connect better with the forces of creation, regardless of what context or title you put upon them. Because it opens up those doors, like I mentioned, about having that freedom to explore, and it brings out the curiosity. As you go through
Hmm.
the fun and the excitement of the adventure, you're also looking at internally and putting yourself within a context of where you fit in.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there is an awful lot to explore in this life, isn't there? And like I said earlier, I think the most ultimate end goal in that exploration is to get to know the God who created it.
Yeah,
So,
most definitely.
yeah.
And like I said, going back to my past, it was one of those things that, yeah, it was in the back of my head, but never in the forefront. And
Hmm.
in order to get comfortable with that, I think is something that it takes time And there's events that are laid out that you have to live within your journey in order to build that, not only that curiosity, but that context to understand the answers that you're uncovering. And that's ultimately what brings you closer to that creative force, as I refer to the creator. They just plain and simple, that great
Hmm.
spirit. And it, as we travel life, where we face events, we have to open our heart. We have to be willing to let those things come forth. But we also have the option of turning away from and not paying attention to the things that are presented to you. So it, it still puts the power within your hand of spirituality to decide where you're going, and based off of what you see, what you the way that you comprehend it, the way that it all plays out. And those are the things that ultimately move that needle, and I feel bring you closer to that spirit.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah. Um, I guess I would argue that we need to be, careful what spirits we draw near to. But as long as we know we're drawing near to the true God, then, uh, then
Yeah, I mean,
the,
that that is a valid fact and a valid point. Is, it takes the
yeah,
intention. It
yeah.
takes actually putting the time and the effort into evaluating what it is
Hmm.
and figuring out if it's good, if it's bad, and how it applies within the greater context of things, within essentially within the circle of life and the circle that each of us carry.
Hmm. Yeah. 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 That process of evaluation is very important, isn't it? No.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because without that, it does you lose that context. You're just simply picking up a book and reading it and
Hmm.
studying it and trying to hide behind, oh, I show up, I read a book and this and that. You're almost phoning it in. You're not putting your personal assets into the journey. And a lot of the way that I apply my spirituality is based off of Native American practices. And one of the fundamentals of that is wrapped around the idea of belief. You have to
Hmm.
believe something in order for it to manifest and become true. And through that evaluation, you're able to essentially authenticate or discard because you find the truth or you find the falsehood in. And
Hmm.
we're always drawn to what we believe to be true. But the thing is, within that context, the thing is, you got to turn inward to find the true truth. Because one person could tell you one thing and say it in a way that's convincing enough that it sounds true. You instinctively want to believe it and buy into it. But without that evaluation as to how it truly pertains to you and your heart, as well as your soul, there's no facts to base it on.
Yeah. Okay. And I would argue too that we need to, um, in order to know what true truth is, we need some, standard by which to evaluate such things. So we need to know that there is a God out there who reveals truth to us, right? So, um, if we, have that objective standard, then we can, have um, a grid or standard by which to evaluate what we believe, whether it is in fact really true or not. Um,
Yeah, and that's where the examples such as this river standing behind me. This is
hmm.
this is a beautiful natural river that was put here by a creative force. And we could find the context of the truth within that based off of simply sitting here and watching the way that water runs through here. You can
Hmm.
see a lesson that you can also turn to the Bible and find a story that validates it. And that
Hmm.
lesson equals or turns out to be the idea of facing adversity. If you think
Hmm.
about how many different voices spoke up and how much adversity that they've had to face in order to become authentic and have that force behind their voice. You look at the way this water runs underneath there, at some point it hits a point where it comes up against resistance,
Hmm.
and over time, the way that water pushes up against that rock, it molds it so that that rock ultimately gives way, pushing the authority and the validation of the fact that its path is true and powerful and meaningful
Hmm.
at that.
Yep.
And these are the kinds of things that really help me to come to get to know that great creative force.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a beautiful river behind you there. You said that's in the Detroit area, I think you said, didn't you?
Yeah, this is actually the Huron River, which feeds into Lake Erie and connects with the Detroit
Oh,
River.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I bet there are catfish in there, aren't there?
There's tons of catfish, there's some pike, a little bit of bass,
Yeah.
bluegill.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite fishing holes right here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You catch any big ones in there?
It's been a
Or is
minute,
that
but
is
I've
that is
had
that a secret?
it's not so much a secret now. But no, I've definitely caught my fair share of nice sized pike and catfish out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we talk about using metaphors in order
Hmm.
to understand the stories that bring us closer, we can talk about and think about the idea that we can touch the fish that we pull out of this river.
Hmm.
And there's a point and there's a purpose behind it. A lot of
Yeah.
us, I know from my own personal journey, the struggle with being able to connect with that force is the feeling like there's no purpose, as if we're lost.
Mm. Yeah.
And when you touch something as beautiful as that, and you realize that there's a point and a purpose for it, you can apply it to yourself. You get that context. And
Mm. Yeah.
it also ties to one of the most powerful quotes that I carry around and use a lot from Daniel Boone, is the fact that God never creates a man of any stature to be lost. You know, we get turned around in the woods for a few days, but we always find our way back.
Yeah.
And
Right. Right.
that's one of the most important relevant things that provides hope.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. Without God, there is no purpose in this life for sure. If the atheists are right and all we are is matter, just bumbling by blind chance through a blind chance uh, cosmos, and there's really no ultimate purpose. So, um, and I think I heard a similar quote, either Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett. He was asked one time if he'd ever been lost, and he said, "No, I've never been lost. I've only been turned around for a week at a time." But
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and to get back to a point like that, it's
mm,
it's so much more than just what someone says to you or what you read. It's actually getting out and living the experiences that
mm,
you find the motivation to germinate that seed of hope or that seed of reason that we all carry. And
yeah,
as that seed begins to germinate and it begins to bloom, that's where it gives principle purpose behind our ability to engage within the world in a meaningful kind of way. And it all comes back to those
mm,
simple practices.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, boy, this world needs a lot more of that sense of purpose and that and the hands-on experience, don't they? I see so many kids who are just lost in a little virtual world, playing their games all the time, and there is a real world out there, a real world out there to be experienced and explored. Uh, recently, I think it was actually, yeah, it wasn't this summer, but a couple summers ago. I was um, driving somewhere, and I went by uh, a field that had a marshy area in the middle of it, kind of quite close to the road, and the that wet area was filled with probably 100 birds called glossy ibises, which we have here in Maine, and they do migrate. It's a shorebird with a long curved beak, and they're dark colored, but very iridescent, very glossy. Depending how the light hits them, they look kind of iridescent green or purple or black. And I've never seen more than one or two at a time. And here's this field with probably 100 foraging in the marshy area, and I was so awestruck by that that I pulled over to watch them. And while I was sitting there watching them, a kid walked by the side of the road. The nearest bird was probably 15, 20 feet from him, and he was had his face down in his little phone thing the whole time, never even noticed. Here he's walking by this, beautiful real world experience, but yet lost in his little electronic gadget. It was very sad.
Yeah, yeah, that's something that in our day and age of this society we deal with a lot because we're
Mm.
automatically growing up, from the time we're born, we're taught distractions
Hmm.
are good. We're taught to
Yeah.
distract ourselves with the nearest thing around.
Hmm.
That it takes a conscious effort to actually get out and work on that, to reprogram ourselves to be present. And that's where, all these different mindful practices, regardless of whatever label that they come from. It doesn't matter if it comes from the school of Buddhism or the school of Christianity or even the school of Native American spirituality. It's all the same in the end. The difference is the label and the context that we as human beings have put on it, or the context that we have taught each other to utilize those things in. And when we remove those labels and we stop looking at all the different terminology around them, we come back to the same simple point: getting out on the ground, putting your boots on the ground is the most grounding thing in the world that can teach you to rewire the way that you move through the world in a way that brings you closer to whatever spiritual source you believe in, or bring you closer to yourself to find a happier, more fulfilling way of life.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess one point that I would take exception with is the idea that the all these views are at base the same. Um, but on the whole, I agree. We do need to get our feet on the ground and to experience uh, what God's created. But I guess the question I would get back to would be, who is this God, and how do we get to know who is the true, the true God, the true spirituality. And if we have distinct differences between different views, then how do we iron the differences out? Which one is right, which one isn't, so forth. So, but anyway, point well made. We need to experience life in order to experience any kind of spirituality or to experience God. We need to experience life, experience the work of His hands, and so forth. So, um, and it sounds like you've made this connection in outdoor activities as I have, which is a very good thing. There's so much out there that's so rich, isn't there?
It really is. I mean, it was funny because I think it was yesterday. It was either yesterday or the day before. I was out on the trail and I was sitting down recording some episodes of the upcoming podcast, and
Hmm.
out of nowhere, there was this rustling in the back, off in the distance, and I looked up and I seen some squirrels. But then about 5 minutes later, that rustling got closer and closer, and this little baby deer come running past me. I mean,
Oh,
she
wonderful.
was she was no taller than my knee. Beautiful,
Yeah,
bright,
yeah.
bright spots. And I'm like, man, that is just absolutely amazing. And it was
Oh,
funny because I'm guilty of it because I do all my production on my phone. So sitting there, I got
hmm.
my head in my phone and I look up and I'm like, oh wow, look at that. So it was
Yeah.
one of those crazy experiences. But again, I take it. from my spiritual background
Hmm.
as a positive sign. You know, when we think about those interactions throughout nature, every
Hmm.
single animal here comes through our experience to tell us something. You know,
Mm.
yeah, we get the stories through the Bible or through listening to someone give their their little talk and so on and so forth. But when it comes down to the personalized experience, and the thing that all this revolves around is that creative spirit speaks to each one of us. That message or that communication always comes through things that we're familiar with, the things
Mm.
that we feel safest with. In my
Yeah.
case, it happens to be nature. It happens to be animals. I'll
Hmm.
along my ventures or my day out, I'll encounter an animal, and there's always something. And I'll give you a great example of that because we talked earlier about spending hours and hours in a tree stand. A
Hmm.
few seasons ago, on November 15th, which I know you're familiar with that date, the
Yeah.
height of the rut. Here in Michigan, it was miserable. Blizzard going on,
Oh no.
freezing
Yeah.
cold temperatures. I'm up
Hmm.
in a tree for about 3 or 4 hours, and this beautiful, beautiful young buck come through that I'd never seen before. Now, I hold myself personally to the rule that if I've never seen a deer before, I'm not drawing on it.
Okay.
So I'm standing there and I'm going, I'm a hunter. Why am I not drawing? It's miserable. I want to get this done. I want to get this over with, right?
Yeah.
And then I thought about my relationship with anxiety, which was just
Hmm.
at that point, it was crippling. You
Oh
know,
wow.
a step. This is a step or two beyond or before, but at a point, to put it in context, I couldn't even go through a drive-through and order food
Oh
because
wow.
I couldn't stand talking to somebody.
Hmm.
And I had progressed through, and I named him Longhorn because he had a beautiful rack and all. And I thought about the fact that his mission in life revolves around this day right here. His job is to prolong his species. Now he's
Hmm.
out here putting his guard down, making all kinds of mistakes, but in the back of his head, he knows that if he really encounters danger, he can rely on himself. He's got the skills to get out of it.
Hmm.
So I thought about back to my anxiety. And even though in reality it's not a life and death situation,
Hmm.
it sure feels like it
Yeah.
when you're having an anxiety attack.
Yeah.
So I thought that representation, if Longhorn can do it in a life and death situation, I can do whatever it is that I need that the anxiety is trying to prevent me from doing
Mm.
in something that I'm perceiving to be the same.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. I'm interested to hear that. So did you? So you don't seem to have that anxiety now. Here you are doing podcasts and you're, talking with people. And how did you finally get over that? It sounds like this
Lots
kind of the deal was a big step.
lots and lots of practice and learning how
Hmm.
to embody that lesson from Longhorn,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
put it simply.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think on a spiritual level, because yeah, I do look at animals and that kind of representation that was the creator saying, hey, it's time to put this in context.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yep.
it
Yep.
and
Very
it
good.
and it's an experience that had I not been out present and mindful and aware
Hmm.
because of all these practices that I combined for me, I never would have had.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
for me, it probably would have been, well, he's here, let's just get it over with and put him down. But instead,
Mm.
it was taking in that beautiful situation and
Yeah.
really
Okay.
finding the context. And
Hmm.
in my eyes, that's what spirituality, regardless of what label you're wrapping around it, equals is finding the context in which your life really is put forth to bring that closer connection, to serve that greater message that the creator put forth.
Yeah. So interesting. So you bring tours of people out on hikes and things at times,
Oh
don't you? Is
yes.
that right? Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting that somebody who had that anxiety in your past is now, out there, doing what you're doing. That's very good. Very good.
And that's where, in my eyes, to get back to the same concept, is we all look at, we all want to turn to whatever creative force we look at, God, and have them take away the burdens and the things that get in our way. But in reality, having that hope and that belief that that'll happen is what pushes us to go out and actually do the work.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. We are required to do the work. Yeah. And if we're looking for an easy solution that circumvents the hard work, then we're really missing out. Life is enriched when we are pressed, when we're pressed, to the point where we, are almost ready to break at times, but yet we persevere and we're stronger for it. So, yeah, the pressing trials of life uh, they're like a refining fire.
And Marcus Aurelius wrote about that in Meditations, which was
Mm,
another powerful step for me, was looking at the idea of fire. Because
hmm
fire takes everything that's around it and it consumes it in order to grow, to become more beautiful. And, those flames get brighter because of everything that it's consuming. We, in our world today, we look for the easy way out of it instead of facing it head on. And when we
mm.
do that, that's how we take that fire within us, our soul, and we refine it. We find the beautiful colors within it and they express themselves because we've consumed the adversities that that force is putting in front of us, because each one of those adversities come to us for a reason. They're specifically prescribed for us in order to do just that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. If there really is a sovereign God, as I believe there is, then everything must have a purpose. Yeah, everything has to be purposeful. Um, as the Bible teaches that all things work together for the good of those who, are truly serving God. So yeah, but
You mentioned something that actually I think was probably the first eye-opening and beautiful moment that I had, is we look for the comfort within this idea that there is a God. So there's got to be peace there, right? And I remember in the last days of my grandmother's life, she really embraced the idea of religion and things like that and found that peace and comfort. But then, and that was kind of all I took from it. But then I look back at her life and I think about the journey she had and just how much work actually went into really building that understanding and that comfort that she had in her final days. And it brings me to this idea that if we stopped and approached each moment as it was our last, we would see the work that we truly have put into each and every day that's led us here, and find those simple little moments of victory that we each need in order to really foster our self-worth and our self-value. And we would find so many tools that would actually empower us to change the narratives of our life to better serve that direction for.
hmm, yeah. Well, very good.
Well, as we're coming down toward the end of our time, though, I want to
Okay.
give you an opportunity to let people know what you got going on, what you got coming up, how they can get in touch with you, all those good things.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm told I'm a kind of a tough guy to get a hold of because I don't do any social media, never have. And I do have an email address, and that is davidlibby87 at gmail.com. So anyone wants to get a hold of me can get a hold of me that way. Um, and what I have going on is I'm working here in central Maine at a, kind of a farm homesteading based kind of Christian ministry where uh, we seek to uh, present a biblical worldview in the context of mindful outdoorness, I guess you could say. Uh, we do a lot of seminars and classes on things like butchering, hunting, uh, foraging for wild edible plants. We've done a number of foraging field days, which is something that I absolutely love to do. Both plants and mushrooms. And I've also written a book that briefly tells the story of my family's very long and difficult battle with chronic illness, started with Lyme disease, because of our outdoor lifestyle, and then seeks to answer some of the difficult philosophical, theological questions, that sort of thing. If there's a God is all good and all powerful, then how could this be happening? How could suffering be happening in this world, and so forth? So, and if anyone's interested in that book, the name of that book is A Different World, subtitled God's Sovereignty in the Face of Suffering. And it's available on Amazon. If you look up my name, David Libby, and the book title, A Different World, people say it's really easy to find. Um, got another book coming out uh, pretty soon here, in a few months probably. But um, I guess that probably wraps up, what I'm doing and who I am and so forth, very briefly. Anything else you want to know, Mike?
You know what? I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this very much, and also good to get to know you and see what a river out in Michigan looks like. You ever come to Maine? You ever come to Maine? Look me up, and we'll do some hunting and fishing together.
Most definitely. I know that's coming up here soon, so I'll have to hit you up.
Yeah, yeah.